Daniel saw it too, his hand stilled on the knife. He watched the child's face. There was no doubt. The name fit. It settled in the room. It changed the air. The blue-skinned boy was no longer a stranger in their shelter. He was Kale. The act was done. They had named the enemy child. They had made him an individual, not a symbol of fear, not a representative of his species. A person, with a name they had chosen for him. With that choice came a thread of attachment. Thin but strong. It was the first conscious step across a line they were never supposed to cross. From that moment he was Kale. The word would call him to meals. It would be spoken in comfort if he fell. It would be used to scold him if he got into trouble. It was a human name for a child who was not human, a bridge built from a single syllable. The door to seeing him as one of their own was now open, just a crack. But it was open. Sarah's exile was her sentence. 5 years ago she had questioned the settlement's teachings about the Scari. She suggested they might not be pure evil. She asked about trade, about contact. Her leaders called it treason. They sent her here, to the edge, to silence. Isolation was supposed to be her protection, hers and theirs. Alone she couldn't infect others with her doubts. Alone she was safe from their judgment. Now she had broken the only rule that mattered. She had let the enemy inside, literally. Sheltering a Scari child was the ultimate violation. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a rejection of everything her people stood for. If they found out, her exile wouldn't just continue. It would become a cage, or a grave. The settlement didn't tolerate dissent. They especially didn't tolerate fraternization with the designated enemy. The punishment was absolute, final. Daniel saw the fear on her face, the stillness in her hands. He put his own knife down. "I'm a fugitive now too," he said. His voice was flat, a statement of fact. He had been a scavenger, neutral, outside the settlement's strict hierarchy, but when he picked up that child and walked away, he chose a side. His own people would hunt him for this, for stealing property, for consorting with the enemy, for bringing a biological risk inside their perimeter. He was as much an outlaw as she was now. History is filled with stories of closed communities, isolated groups. They survive by enforcing conformity. The punishment for stepping out of line is always extreme. It has to be. One crack can split the wall. One doubter can create a dozen more. So they make examples. They use fear to keep the rest in line. Sarah knew this. She had lived it. Her exile was the example. Now she was risking becoming the next one. A fiercer warning. Kale slept on the floor between them. He had curled on a blanket, his breathing deep and even. His blue skin looked almost gray in the low firelight. He showed no sign of understanding their tension. No sense that two people were debating his life, their lives, in hushed tones above him. His calm was unnerving. It was a child's trust, a complete lack of fear. It made their own anxiety feel heavy. Loud. They looked from the sleeping child to each other. The unspoken question hung in the air. What now? They couldn't keep him in the open. The settlement did patrols. They checked on exiles. Not often. But they came. Someone would see. Someone would talk. The decision formed without words. A shared glance. A slow nod. They would hide him. They would conceal his presence completely. No one could know. Not until they could prove something. Prove he wasn't a threat. Prove he was just a child. It was a thin hope. A dangerous one. But it was the only choice they had. To turn him out was to kill him. To give him up was the same. So they would keep the secret. They would become a unit of 3 against the world. The exile, the fugitive, and the child they weren't supposed to love. The weight of that choice settled over the room. It was a quieter burden than the storm, but far heavier. It was the weight of a shared future, built on a lie they had to make true. Councilwoman Evelyn Price led the inspection herself. She never did that. Usually she sent junior officers. Exile quarters were beneath her. But today she was there, 4 guards with her. Their boots were loud on the wooden planks outside Sarah's shelter. They did routine checks, looking for contraband, signs of disloyalty, anything that broke the isolation rules. Sarah stood in the doorway. Her hands were still. She tried to block the view. It didn't work. Price stepped inside without asking. Her eyes scanned the room, tidy, sparse. Then they stopped on the pile of blankets in the corner. They were moving. A slight shift. a small shape underneath. Price pointed. "What is that?" Her voice was sharp, cold. Sarah said nothing. One of the guards pushed past her. He yanked the blankets back. There was Kale, curled up, sleeping. His blue skin was unmistakable under the lantern light. His silver eyes opened, confused by the sudden noise. For a second, nobody moved. Then chaos. The guard stumbled back, drawing his sidearm. Another guard raised a rifle. Shouts filled the small space. "Scary, inside the wire." Panic is contagious. In a group, it spreads faster than any disease. One person's fear becomes everyone's. Research into crowd behavior shows this. A visible threat, especially one that fits existing fears, triggers a collective response. Rational thought shuts down. Instinct takes over. And their instinct was to destroy. Evelyn Price didn't flinch. Her face hardened. She looked from the child to Sarah. "A biological weapon," she declared. Her voice cut through the noise. "A planted infiltrator. You've doomed us all." She didn't see a child. She saw a threat. A story she'd been told her whole life. The Scari are monsters. They are cunning. They use trickery. This was just another trick. A small blue-skinned trick, Kale reacted. For the first time since they found him, he showed fear. He didn't cry, didn't scream. He pushed himself up. His small legs wobbled. He scrambled to Sarah and clutched her leg. His tiny hands gripped her pants. He pressed his face against her. He was shaking, but he made no sound. No whimper. His silence was absolute. The guards saw this. They didn't see a terrified child. They saw control, predatory stillness. "See?" one of them muttered. "It doesn't even cry." Like an animal. Their fear reinterpreted everything. A child's silence became a monster's patience. His need for comfort became a tactical move. Daniel moved then. He stepped between the raised weapons and Sarah. He kept his own hands visible. "A trial," he said. His voice was calm. Too calm for the tension in the room. "You have laws. You have a council. Use them, hear the evidence, then decide." He was offering them a way out, a path back to reason, a chance to follow procedure instead of fear. Evelyn Price studied him. Her eyes were narrow. The guards held their aim. The air was tight. She knew the rules. Execution required a council vote. Even for this. Especially for this. A public spectacle. She nodded once. A sharp, jerky motion. "We will convene," she said. The child remains contained. Under guard, it was a stay of execution, fragile, temporary, but it was a chance. They would have to prove the impossible, that the enemy was not the enemy. The settlement gathered in the main hall. It was full. Every adult stood along the walls. Their faces were hard, suspicious. They were there to decide one thing. Was the blue-skinned child a threat or just a child? Governor Walsh sat at the front. Evelyn Price stood beside him. Her hands were clasped. She spoke first. Her voice was clear. It cut through the murmurs. She called Kale an infiltration agent, a biological weapon planted by the Scari. She said his calm was a deception. His intelligence was a weapon waiting to be used. Hidden capabilities. She painted a picture of a predator in a child's form. Abstract fear is a powerful force, but practical value is stronger. When a life is saved by the very thing you feared, the math changes. The fear doesn't vanish, but it is outweighed. It is measured against a new fact. A fact written in blood stopped and a child comforted. For the first time, Kale's worth was not theoretical. It was proved on the clinic floor. Kale started making sounds that weren't human. They weren't all Scari either. He was mixing them, blending sharp clicks from his native tongue with the softer vowels of human speech. It created a strange hybrid babble. Some settlers heard it and stiffened. They called it code. They said he was signaling, sending messages to his kind. Suspicion ran deep. It was easier to believe in conspiracy than in a child learning to talk. His first clear human word changed that. He was sitting with Sarah near the fire. She was showing him how to mend a torn shirt. Her hands moved with the needle. His eyes followed. Then he reached out. He placed his small blue hand on top of hers. He looked up at her face. His silver eyes were steady. He said it. Safe. The word was clear, unmistakable. It wasn't a random sound. It was attached to a feeling, to the security of her presence. He wasn't just mimicking. He was connecting a word to an emotion. That's a complex leap. It shows understanding, not just repetition. Linguistic studies of contact zones show this pattern. When two languages meet, a new one often forms. A pidgin, a bridge of shared meaning. It allows for basic communication, for expressing needs and feelings. It's the first step toward real understanding. That's what Cale was building. A bridge of sounds between his world and theirs. He proved it again a week later. Old Man Harris was struggling with a sack of grain. His back was bad. He was dragging it across the compound yard. Cale was watching from the porch. He saw the strain on the man's face. He saw the slow, painful progress. Cale walked over. He didn't try to lift the sack. He couldn't. He looked up at Harris. He said the word, "Help." Then he turned and went to find Daniel. He led Daniel back to the struggling man. The context was perfect. The word was used correctly. It was a genuine offer of assistance, a recognition of another's need. This was communication, real and purposeful. It wasn't a code. It was a request, a connection. The settlers saw it. They couldn't deny it any longer. The child was talking. He was intelligent. He understood them. Slowly, the resistance broke. People began to teach him words. A woman pointed to a cup and said the word. He repeated it. A guard showed him a tree, said the name. Cale said it back. They taught him water, food, cold. He learned fast. His hybrid babble began to include more human words. The bridge was being built word by word. Language did what fear could not. It created a common ground. Suspicion had been a wall, a solid barrier of silence and assumption. Now there was sound. There was meaning passing back and forth. The simple act of naming things together became a shared project, a way to see the world through a common lens. The child who was once the ultimate outsider was now asking for the names of things. He was inviting them in, and they were starting to answer. The barrier was cracking, replaced by the slow, careful construction of a bridge made of shared words. A scary warrior walked into the settlement. Alone. He carried a white flag on a spear. The guards saw him coming. Their hands went to their weapons. Rifles came up. Crossbows were leveled. They expected an attack, or a demand. They expected to be told to return the stolen child. The air was tight. Ready to snap, the warrior stopped at the gate. He was tall. His blue skin was marked with old scars. His silver eyes looked past the weapons. He looked at the people. His voice was deep, calm. He gave his name, Theron Starweaver. Then he asked for Cale Tuvin. The words were strange, sharp. The guards didn't understand. They just heard the child's name. Their grip on their weapons tightened. Sarah and Daniel were brought forward. They stood inside the gate. Theron looked at them. He repeated the words. Cale Tuvin. Daniel asked what it meant. Theron's answer changed everything. Tuvin means grandson. He said it plainly. A statement of fact. The weapons didn't lower, but the tension shifted. A claim of kinship, not a threat. Anthropology shows how kinship systems work. They create obligation. They build bridges, even across enemy lines. To claim a child as family is to claim a bond, a responsibility. It is a powerful thing. It can force a reevaluation of everything. Theron was not here for a fight. He was here for family, he explained further. He pointed to his own eyes, silver, like the child's. He spoke of bone structure, the line of the jaw, the set of the eyes. These were markers, signs of a specific lineage among his people. Cale bore them all. He was not just any scary child. He was of a particular bloodline, a recognized family. Then he spoke of the massacre, the one where Daniel found the child. Theron called it an attack on his family. His daughter was there, her mate, their kin. It was not a military action against humans. It was a targeted slaughter, a wiping out of a specific bloodline. The humans who died were likely guards, allies, friends. They died protecting Cale's family. The narrative of the war fractured. It was not species against species. It was something hunting a particular family, and the child was the sole survivor. The resolution was quiet, a settling of understanding. Cale was not stolen property. He was not a weapon left behind. He was rescued kin, a grandson lost and found. The enemy narrative, built over generations, collapsed under the weight of a single word, Tuvin, grandson. The child became living proof. Proof that the two species were not just enemies. They could be family. They could share blood. They could share loss. They could share a child. The walls of fear, built so high and so strong, began to seem foolish. A grandparent had come for his grandson. It was that simple. And that complicated. The war's history was being rewritten not by a politician or a general, but by an elder asking for his family. The child who was a symbol of fear became a symbol of connection. A bridge made of blood and bone. Theron Starweaver proposed a meeting. Face to face, Skari elders and human leaders together. It had never been done. The settlement council agreed. Reluctantly. They met in the main hall. Two groups, separate tables. The humans on one side, the Skari on the other. An empty space between them. Distrust was a physical thing in the room. Each side brought their own interpreter. They didn't trust the other's translations. They suspected hidden meanings, deception. Every word would be weighed for poison. Kale walked into that space. He moved from his grandfather's side to Sarah's, then back again. He listened to a human concern about border security. He turned and explained it to the Skari elders. He used their concepts, their terms for territory and honor. He listened to a Skari elder speak of hunting grounds disrupted. He translated it for the humans into terms of resource allocation and safety. He wasn't just changing words. He was building understanding, making each side's fears and needs clear to the other. His small size changed the dynamic. He was a child, not a soldier, not a diplomat. He carried no weapon. His only tool was his care for both groups. It was visible, the way he looked at his grandfather, the way he touched Sarah's hand for reassurance. This reduced the defensive posturing. The stiff shoulders relaxed slightly. The clenched jaws loosened. You don't raise a weapon in front of a child who is trying to help. Studies of conflict show this. A child's presence can lower tension. It creates a different kind of space, a more human space. He became the key to sharing knowledge. A Skari elder spoke of the devourers, their patterns, how they moved through the deep forests, their weakness for certain sounds. Kale translated this. He made the complex Skari ecological knowledge clear to the humans. This was vital information. It could save lives. It was a gift, an offering of trust. Then the human engineers explained their trench designs, their early warning systems. Kale translated the technical terms into Skari concepts of earth and warning. He made the blueprints understandable. He built a bridge of practical ideas. The focus of the room shifted. It was no longer about old grievances. It was about a new common problem. The devourers threatened them both. Theron stated it plainly. Dead people have no enemies. The truth of it landed. An enemy you understand is better than a mystery that kills everyone. The two groups saw the logic. The necessity and agreement was reached. Not a full peace, not yet, but a pact. A shared defense agreement against the devourers. Joint patrols along the border. Shared intelligence. A combined effort to face the real threat. The child's unique position made it possible. He was the only one who could move so freely between the two worlds. He was the only one they both trusted enough to listen to. He was the translator, the bridge, the indispensable element. Without him, the talks would have failed. The two sides would have remained in their separate corners, watching each other with suspicion while a greater danger gathered strength in the dark. He gave them a common language, and in doing so gave them a chance. Then Daniel stood. He told them about the massacre site, the torn camp, the dead from both sides, humans and Skari lying together. He described finding the child, the only survivor in a field of slaughter. He was clear. He was direct. This was not a military engagement. It was an extermination. Something had killed everyone. Something that left only a child alive. His testimony reframed the scene. Not a battle. A mystery. Sarah spoke next. Her voice was quieter. She talked about development. She described his coordination, his problem-solving, his calm nature, how he responded to care. She listed facts. He drank without spilling. He stacked blocks with purpose. He turned to his name. She spoke of the lack of fear responses, the steady hands, the observing eyes. She presented a child, not a weapon. Anthropology shows a pattern. Communities reject what doesn't fit. They force new things into old categories, or they destroy them. The people in that hall were trying to fit Kale into a box labeled enemy. The evidence didn't match. The tension was a visible thing. You could feel it in the air, then it happened. A young boy near the front stumbled. He fell hard on the stone floor. He started to cry. Everyone looked. Before his parents could move, Cale did. He walked over. His steps were sure for his age. He knelt. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked at the boy. He put a small blue hand on the boy's arm. He helped him stand. It was a simple act, unprompted, a display of empathy that required no language. The hall went silent. The crying stopped. The boy stared at Cale. The crowd murmured. Low sounds of surprise, confusion. This was not the action of a monster. This was the action of a child helping another child. Cross-species assistance. It was undeniable. It was real. Evelyn Price's jaw was tight. She saw it. Everyone saw it. The governor looked from the two children back to the council. The evidence was no longer just words. It was action. The proposal came then. Not banishment. Not execution. A test period. Cale would remain under observation. Weekly inspections. They would watch him. Document everything. If he showed any sign of threat, they would reassess. It was a compromise. A fragile one. Fear was still in the room. It was thick, but now it was mixed with something else. Curiosity. A willingness to see, to observe. The council had given them a chance. A thin thread of hope. The trial was over. The real test was just beginning. The testing period began under guard watch. Two men stood outside Sarah's shelter day and night. They recorded everything. Weekly, a council member came to inspect. Evelyn Price often, sometimes others. They watched Cale eat. They watched him sleep. They watched him play. Every move was a data point. Every gesture was analyzed for deception or threat. The child lived in a cage made of eyes. Cale began walking at 7 months old. His steps were sure, balanced. Human children that age crawl. They pull themselves up. They stumble. He did not. He walked across the room with a steady gait. His coordination was far advanced. It was the first major deviation from human development. The guards noted it. Their reports grew longer. He played with a set of wooden blocks. He did not just stack them randomly. He built patterns. Symmetrical shapes. Towers with deliberate balance. He would study the blocks, turn them in his hands, then place them with intention. The structures were complex. They suggested a mind that understood weight, geometry, mathematical principles. Developmental research shows a clear link. Advanced physical skills often signal exceptional intelligence. The body moves with purpose because the brain directs it with clarity. He began to help Sarah with small tasks. She organized medical supplies each morning, bandages, antiseptics, herbs. Cale watched her do this twice. On the third day, he started handing her items before she reached for them. He anticipated her needs. He passed her the roll of gauze when she needed to wrap a wound. He brought the jar of powdered yarrow root when she was mixing a poultice. These were not guesses. They were observations turned into action, practical demonstrations of a working intelligence. The guards saw this. Their initial suspicion was tempered by evidence. They watched a child, not a weapon. They saw him show affection to Sarah and Daniel. They saw him share his food with them. They saw him comfort a crying toddler who had wandered too close to the guards during an inspection. He placed a small blue hand on the child's cheek. The toddler stopped crying. The guards did not write that up as a threat. They wrote it as an observation, a fact. After 3 months of this, the weekly reports contained no notes of aggression, no signs of malice. Even the most skeptical guards had nothing negative to say. Councilman Peters, once a vocal opponent, admitted the child's development was accelerated, different but not dangerous. The evidence was too consistent to ignore. The council convened one final time. They reviewed the logs. They read the guard statements. They listened to the inspectors. The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. They granted Sarah and Daniel formal guardianship. Cale was theirs to raise, to protect. The armed guard was withdrawn. The weekly inspections ceased. Suspicion did not vanish. It lingered in sideways glances, in muttered comments when Cale walked past a group of settlers. But it was no longer the official stance. The child was now a legal resident of the settlement, a person with protectors. The testing period was over. The living period had begun. His every action had been a quiet argument for his humanity, and he had won. Not with words, but with behavior. The proving ground had yielded its verdict. He was just a child, an unusual one, but a child nonetheless. The storm hit fast, a late-season blizzard. It wasn't just snow. It was wind that tore at shutters. It was ice that coated the paths. At the lumber camp, Marcus Reed's youngest son was caught in the chaos. A misstep on an icy log pile. A sharp crack. A deep gash opened on his leg. Blood soaked his pants fast. The boy was screaming. They carried him to the clinic through the whiteout. The clinic was a mess. The storm had rattled shelves. Supplies were scattered. Bandages mixed with dried herbs on the floor. Antiseptic bottles had tipped over. The medic was already overwhelmed. 2 other settlers had frostbite. A child with a broken wrist from slipping on ice. Sarah ran in, her coat still covered in snow. She saw the boy on the table. The cut was bad. Bleeding wouldn't stop. She needed pressure. She needed sutures. She needed order in the chaos. She was one person. The clinic was understaffed. The storm had made everyone needed elsewhere. Cale was there. He had followed her. Daniel was supposed to be watching him. But the blizzard had created confusion. The child stood in the corner, out of the way. His silver eyes took in the room. The bleeding boy, the scattered supplies, Sarah's frantic movements. He didn't wait to be told. He moved. He walked to a shelf. His small hands picked up a roll of gauze. He brought it to Sarah. She took it without looking, pressed it to the wound. Then he was gone again. He came back with a bottle of antiseptic. The right one. Then he brought a threaded bone needle. Exactly what she needed for the deep sutures. He anticipated her next move each time. He moved with purpose. No hesitation. Emergency medicine research shows a clear pattern. In high-stress situations, an extra pair of hands changes outcomes. Even non-human assistance can drastically improve survival rates by reducing critical seconds lost to searching, fetching, and confusion. Cale was that assistance. He wasn't just fetching. He was thinking, predicting. His actions were those of a trained aide, not a toddler. The boy on the table was crying. Hard. Shock was setting in. His skin was pale. His father, Marcus, stood nearby. His face was a mask of fear and helplessness. Cale finished handing Sarah a clamp. Then he turned to the boy. He placed his small blue hand on the boy's forehead. His touch was cool, calm. The boy's crying hitched, slowed. Cale didn't speak. He just kept his hand there. A steady, gentle pressure. The fevered skin seemed to calm under his touch. Marcus watched this. His prejudice was a solid thing, built over a lifetime of warnings. He had voted against keeping the child. He had called him a risk, a menace. Now he saw that same child helping save his son's life. He saw the cool hand soothing his boy's terror. He saw the precise assistance given to the healer. The evidence was in front of him. It warred with everything he believed. His jaw was tight. His hands clenched. But his eyes were on his son. On the small blue hand offering comfort, the bleeding stopped. The wound was closed. The boy's breathing eased. He would live. The immediate danger passed. The tension in the clinic shifted from panic to exhausted relief. Marcus looked at Cale. The child was back in his corner, watching, silent. Marcus's voice was rough when he spoke. He helped save my boy's life. The words were simple. An admission. A crack in the wall, abstract. The devourers came from the deep mountains. They were not like the Scari. They were not like humans. They were something else. A force of pure consumption. They moved in packs. They took everything. They left nothing. Their arrival changed the math of the frontier. The old hatred between human and Scari suddenly looked like a luxury, a conflict they could no longer afford. The first reports were from Scari scouts. They spoke of the creatures moving through the high passes. Their path was taking them toward the human settlement areas. The news created a split in the human camp. Some said let them come. Let the devourers wipe out the Scari first. Then the humans could deal with the weakened victors. It was an old, bitter logic. The logic of letting your enemy bleed for you. Theron Starweaver stood in the council hall when he heard this talk. His face was stone. He looked at the men who suggested it. Dead people have no enemies, he said. The words were simple. They hung in the air. The truth of them was cold and absolute. If the Skari fell, the humans would be next. If the humans fell, the Skari would follow. Survival was now a shared problem. Military history is littered with these moments. Common threats create alliances that would have been unthinkable weeks before. Enemies become partners because the alternative is extinction. Kale felt them coming before anyone saw them. He was playing near the western wall. He stopped. His head came up. His silver eyes went distant. He made a low sound in his throat. A warning hum. He ran to Daniel, tugged his sleeve, pointed west. His small face was serious. Daniel didn't question it. He sounded the alarm. Scouts were sent out. They came back with confirmation. A large pack of devourers was moving toward the settlement. Kale's early warning gave them time. Precious hours to prepare, to bring in patrols, to set defenses. His unique senses, a blend of human and Skari perception, had detected what their technology and scouts had missed. That warning made the argument for them. It was no longer about theory. It was about the reality of claws and teeth coming over the ridge. The council met with Theron and his warriors. The discussion was short. The decision was clear. They would fight together. Joint patrols along the shared border. Human and Skari scouts would walk the same lines. They would share intelligence immediately. No delays, no filters. What one group learned, the other would know. The agreement was not a celebration. It was a grim necessity. Handshakes were replaced with tactical nods. Suspicion was set aside because it was a weight they could no longer carry. The immediate need to survive overwhelmed generations of learned hatred. The enemy of my enemy is not my friend, but he is for a time my ally. The shared threat redesigned the map of their world. The line between human and Skari land became a line they defended together, a border they now held side by side. The child who had been a point of conflict became their first best early warning system. His value was no longer in question. His survival was now tied to theirs. Theirs to his. The fight was no longer against each other. It was for each other. A brutal practical alliance forged in the shadow of a greater darkness. The devourers came at first light. They moved in waves, not a disorganized rush. A coordinated assault. They hit the settlement's western wall. Human crossbow teams fired from the ramparts. Skari warriors waited on the ground. The two groups fought, but they fought separately. Old instincts took over. Years of seeing each other as the enemy created an invisible line on the battlefield. The humans stayed behind their barricades. The Skari used their speed, striking then retreating. This division created gaps. The devourers exploited them. The defense was holding, but it was brittle. A fractured effort against a unified force. Kale saw this. He stood on the rampart with Daniel. His silver eyes tracked the flow of the fight. He saw where the human volleys landed. He saw where the Skari struck. He saw the moments when the two actions failed to connect. He moved. He ran down the steps into the chaos. He ignored the clatter of weapons and the roars of the beasts. He went to the human crossbow captain. He pointed to a cluster of devourers massing for a push. He showed the captain where to aim. Not at the center of mass. At the joint where a leg met the body, a weak point in their biology. The volley was redirected. It struck true. The advancing cluster stumbled and fell. He didn't stop there. He ran to Theron and his raiders. He used sharp Skari clicks and human words mixed together. He pointed to the disruption caused by the crossbow strike. He showed them the opening, a path of chaos through the devourer ranks. The Skari warriors moved. They flowed into the gap. Their blades were a silver blur. They cut down the disoriented creatures. It was a perfect combination. A human hammer blow followed by a Skari scalpel cut, a tactic that neither group could have executed alone. Their separate methods, when timed together, became something new. Something devastating. Military history proves the value of this. An integrated command structure, where different units support each other's actions, dramatically improves defensive effectiveness. It turns separate strengths into a combined force. It covers weaknesses. It creates opportunities where none existed. Kale was that integration. He was the living link. His dual understanding of both species' capabilities allowed him to see the battle as a single canvas. He could spot the moment a human barrage would create a shockwave. He could direct Skari mobility to exploit that shock before it faded. The battle raged for hours. The devourer numbers seemed endless. But the line held. It held because it was no longer two lines. It was one. Human crossbow teams learned to fire suppressing volleys on command to create openings for Scary strikes. Scary scouts relayed enemy movements back to the human commanders in real time. The child moved tirelessly between them, a small blue-skinned conductor orchestrating a symphony of survival. His voice, though young, carried authority born of undeniable results. When the last devourer fell, the silence was heavy. The field was littered with the dead, but the wall stood. The settlement was secure. The humans and Scary looked across the blood-soaked ground at each other. The suspicion was still there. The old hatreds didn't vanish in a day, but they were now tempered by a new reality. They had fought together. They had won together. The battlefield had been the ultimate proving ground. It had tested their alliance not with words, but with blood and results. The practical value of their cooperation was no longer a theory. It was written in the bodies of their fallen enemies. They had held the line. Together, a devourer's claws did more than tear flesh. They carried a toxin, a venom that turned blood black and made the muscles seize. A young settler took a deep gash to his leg during a patrol skirmish. They got him back to the clinic fast. Sarah cleaned the wound. She used their strongest antiseptics. She applied pressure. She sutured the torn skin. But the poison was already in him. His skin turned gray. His breathing became shallow. His pulse was a weak flutter. Human medicine had no answer for this. The injury was beyond their knowledge. The soldier was dying. Theron was there. He saw the man's condition. He recognized the signs. He spoke to his warriors in quick, sharp Scary. One of them ran from the clinic. He returned with a small leather pouch. Theron opened it. Inside was a mix of dried herbs and a thick, dark paste. He explained. The devourer toxin was known to his people. Their hunters had encountered it before. This poultice was the counter. It drew the poison out, neutralized it. He offered it to Sarah. There was no hesitation. No debate, a life was on the line. Sarah took the pouch. She trusted the offer. She applied the Scary poultice directly to the wound. The smell was sharp, earthy. The blackened flesh around the cut seemed to lighten almost immediately. Then she did what she knew. She reapplied human antiseptic around the edges of the injury to prevent infection, to fight the bacteria that could take hold in the weakened tissue. Two different traditions, working on the same body, against the same threat. Medical anthropology documents this pattern. Under crisis, healing practices merge. When survival is the goal, old boundaries break down. Knowledge from isolated sources combines to create new solutions. This was that moment. A human healer and a Scary remedy working in tandem. Cale watched from his usual corner. His eyes took in every movement. He saw Sarah's focused intensity. He saw Theron's calm assurance. He saw the soldier's labored breathing. He moved without being asked. He brought Sarah a fresh roll of bandages. Then he went to Theron. He pointed to a specific herb in the open pouch. A different one. Theron's eyebrows went up. He nodded. He crushed the new herb into the existing paste. Cale had seen something, understood a nuance. He had bridged the two methods. His small hands helped press the enhanced poultice against the man's leg. He understood both worlds of healing. His touch was sure, the effect was undeniable. The soldier's breathing deepened. The gray pallor began to recede from his skin. His pulse strengthened under Sarah's fingers. The combination had worked. The Scary antidote had pulled the poison. The human antiseptic was guarding against secondary infection. The man would live. His life was saved by a fusion of knowledge that had been separate for generations. The resolution was practical. In the days that followed, the council approved a new initiative. A combined medical research program. Human doctors and Scary healers would work together. They would share their knowledge of anatomy, of herbs, of toxins and treatments. They would create a new library of healing. One that drew from both species' understanding of the body and the world. The value of integrated knowledge was no longer theoretical. It was proved on the clinic table. A man was alive because two hostile traditions had become one. The success was measured in a steady pulse and clear eyes. It was an argument stronger than any speech. It was a life saved. A year changed the settlement. The place once called simply the Outpost now had a new name, Haven's Rest. The first truly integrated human Scary community. Humans and Scary lived side by side. They worked the same fields. They shared the same meals. They stood the same watches. The old fear was not gone. It lingered in some eyes, in muttered words when a Scary walked by too close. in the stiff posture of an old guard forced to work with a blue-skinned partner. Prejudice surfaced sometimes. A shared well, a disputed tool, a forgotten promise. The tension was real, but it was no longer the rule. It was the exception. Children led the way. They always do. Human children and scary young played together in the dusty yard. They invented new games that used human running and scary climbing. They taught each other words. A human child would say ball. A scary child would click the word for throw. They built a shared language of play. It was loud. It was messy. It was the sound of a new world being made. They did not see enemies. They saw playmates, friends. Cale was at the center of it. His growth was rapid. His understanding of both cultures was complete. He helped design the new structures. He explained to human builders that scary doorways needed to be taller. Their shoulders were broader. He showed scary stoneworkers that human shelves should be lower. Their reach was different. He became a living bridge, a translator of space and need. The buildings that went up were for everyone. They accommodated both bodies. They welcomed both peoples. Sociological research supports what they built. Integrated spaces reduce prejudice. When people share walls, share meals, share daily life, the unknown becomes known. The feared becomes familiar. The settlement was proof of this. A living experiment in coexistence. The shared struggle against the devourers had forced them together. The peace that followed gave them room to build. The star showers returned. The skies once more filled with streaks of fire. But the meaning had changed. The showers were no longer a signal of danger. They did not send people running for cover. Instead, they became a time of gathering. Families, human and scary, would sit outside together. They would watch the light show. They would share food. They would tell stories. The terror was gone, replaced by a quiet awe, a shared appreciation for the beauty of their world. Cale would sleep between Sarah and Daniel on those nights. They would lay blankets on the ground. He would watch the sky until his eyes grew heavy. Then he would curl between them. His breathing would slow. His small blue hand would grip Daniel's sleeve. There was no fear in him, only comfort. The meteors that once spelled ruin now painted the sky in shades of silver and blue. They were a reminder of where he came from, and a symbol of the safety he had found. The model worked. The proof was in the survival, in the peace. Other frontier settlements took notice. Scouts and traders brought stories back to their own isolated communities. They spoke of a place where humans and scary lived together, where strength was combined, where knowledge was shared, where children played without fear. The idea began to spread. A few brave souls from other outposts made the journey to see for themselves. They saw the shared patrols, the combined clinics, the children's games. They took the idea home. The transformation that began with one child on a doorstep began to ripple across the region. A new social order was being built, not through conquest, not through force, through example, through the slow, hard daily work of choosing cooperation over fear. The frontier was being remade. One shared meal, one joint patrol, one playing child at a time. The legacy of that one decision on a stormy night was now rewriting the future of an entire territory. Sarah, Daniel, and Theron sat together on the porch of the new clinic. The sun was setting. Cale played in the yard with other children, human and scary. Their laughter mixed with the evening insects. The men watched him. His growth was visible. He was no longer the small, silent child found in ruins. He was becoming someone. The conversation turned to his future.
What would he be?
A bridge, a leader, a healer? The old categories felt too small. Human, scary. They did not fit him. They did not fit any of them anymore. Tension existed in the silence between them. Their family was not in any settlement record. It crossed species lines. It defied every tradition. Sarah was human. Daniel was human. Theron was scary. Cale was scary. But the bonds between them were as strong as blood. Stronger, perhaps. They were chosen, built, earned. The rules of kinship, once so clear, now seemed like faded words on an old map. Useless for the territory they now walked. Cale ran up the steps. His face was flushed from play. He went to Sarah. He wrapped his arms around her waist. He looked up. "Mama," he said. The human word was clear, warm. Then he turned to Theron. He used a soft, scary click. "Cale Tuvin," he said. Little star, grandfather. The names were gifts. They were acknowledgments. He moved between the two languages with an ease that was natural to him. For the elders, it was still a conscious effort, a thing they had to think about. For him, it was simply how the world was. He was born of two worlds. He lived in both. Anthropology shows us this truth. Kinship is not solely a matter of biology. It is constructed. It is built from shared meals, shared dangers, shared laughter. It is a choice to care for another, to protect them, to see their well-being as your own. The settlement had begun to understand this. They saw the family that had formed around the blue-skinned child. They saw the devotion, the protection, the love. It was not inherited. It was chosen. Every day, in every action, Kale was the living proof of this new understanding. He was loved not because he was scary or because he was human. He was loved because he was Kale. His worth was not in his bloodline. It was in his character, his intelligence, his compassion. He represented a possibility. That family could be wider than species. That connection could be stronger than tradition. The resolution was not a law passed. It was a ritual created. They designed a new ceremony. It combined elements from both cultures. Human words of commitment were spoken. Scary symbols of protection were drawn on the ground. They stood together, Sarah, Daniel, Theron, and Kale. They made promises not based on blood but on bond. They acknowledged each other as family, chosen, intended, built. The child who had been found alone, belonging to no one, had become the center of a new kind of community. He was everyone's, a son to humans, a grandson to Skari, a friend to the children of both. He was a living answer to the question of family. It is not who you are born to. It is who stands with you, who fights for you, who calls you by name and means it. The definition had expanded. It now included a blue-skinned boy and the three very different people who had decided against all reason to love him. Governor Walsh stood before the assembled settlement. The harvest was in. The storage huts were full. The defenses stood firm. He looked out at the faces. Human and scary mixed together now. He spoke of survival, of the hard year behind them. Then he turned to the boy standing near the front. Kale. He acknowledged his role, his early warnings, his actions in the clinic, his help during the battle. The words were formal, a recognition of service, but their meaning was deeper. It was an acceptance. The highest authority in the settlement was thanking a Skari child for saving them. The world had truly turned, not everyone agreed. You could see it in the crowd. An old farmer's crossed arms, a guard's narrowed eyes. Whispers still moved through the lines. They spoke of contamination, of lost purity. They feared the mixing of blood and culture. They saw every handshake between species as a risk, every shared meal as a dilution. The old fear was a ghost. It haunted the edges of their new peace. It would take more than one speech to banish it completely. Captain Hayes brought reports from the Western patrols. He spoke to the council. Other settlements were watching. They had heard the stories. They saw the traders moving freely between human and Skari zones. They saw the joint patrols along the border. Some were curious. A few sent envoys to learn. The alliance model was spreading, not by force, by example. One frontier outpost had already signed a similar pact with a nearby Skari clan. They were building a shared watchtower. The idea was taking root. A new way of living was becoming possible. Marcus Reed stood up after the captain. His voice was rough. He was not a man given to speeches. He spoke of his son, the boy whose life was saved in the clinic. He spoke of the blue hands that brought the antiseptic, the cool touch that calmed the fever. He did not use fancy words. He said Kale helped. He said the child was brave. He said he was glad he was here. It was a simple statement, from a man who had once called for the child's banishment. His words carried more weight than any governor's decree. They were proof of a changed heart. History has its quiet turning points. Sometimes a single life, especially a young one, can alter the course of a society. A child's actions, free of adult prejudice, can show a different path. Kale was that life. His presence forced a re-evaluation of everything they thought they knew. His mercy challenged their fear. His intelligence challenged their assumptions. His very existence became an argument for a wider world. Kale now stood before a different group. A mix of human and Skari children. He held a slate. He was teaching, He wrote human letters. He made scary clicking sounds. The children watched him. They repeated the words. They learned each other's languages. He explained human stories to the Skari young. He translated Skari hunting chants for the human kids. His unique perspective allowed him to see the world through both sets of eyes. He became a window for each species into the other's mind. The meteor showers returned that season, the night sky filled with silent, brilliant streaks of light. The people of Haven's Rest gathered outside to watch. They did not hide. They did not fear. They pointed. They smiled. Parents lifted children onto their shoulders to see the display. The showers were no longer an omen of destruction. They were a spectacle of beauty, a shared moment of wonder under a generous sky. The symbol had been remade. Fear was replaced with hope. The blue-skinned child who had knocked on a door during a storm had done the impossible. He had redefined the relationship between two enemy species. He had shown that the lines between us and them are not fixed. They are choices. He proved that a single act of compassion can be more powerful than generations of hatred. His legacy was not in laws or treaties, but in the daily reality of a community that had learned to see itself differently. He was the living proof that a new future was not just possible. It was already here. The child found in ruin became the foundation of a new world. Mercy proved stronger than fear when tested against one vulnerable life. His existence challenged every assumption, forcing a re-evaluation of what was possible between species. The alliance that grew from that single act of compassion rewrote the future of the frontier. Sometimes salvation arrives in the most unexpected form. It doesn't always come with an army or a declaration. Sometimes it's just a knock on your door during a storm, asking for a chance. A brutal meteor storm rages as a stranger pounds on an exile's door. He's holding a blue-skinned infant with silver eyes, a child of the Skari, the very species humans have been taught to fear. He's not yours, but he needs you, Daniel insists, forcing Sarah to choose between safety and a dangerous hope. What would you do if Mercy demanded you shelter the enemy? Sarah Carter heard the pounding against the storm's roar, not wind or debris, but a fist. She saw a man through the rain-streaked window, drenched, his face pale under the flicker of meteor light. His name was Daniel Brooks. She had never seen him before. He held a bundle tight against his chest, wrapped in a soaked cloak. His knuckles were raw from striking the door. Another meteor flared overhead, closed this time. The light caught the stranger's eyes. Desperate. Determined. He didn't wait for questions. Sarah Carter, he said, his voice cutting through the wind. He knew her name. That alone was a warning. Then he shifted the bundle. A small face turned toward her. Blue skin, silver eyes. The mark of the Skari. Every instinct told her to slam the bolt to bar the door. This was the enemy. The very reason her people had walls and rules and exiles like her. He's not yours, Daniel said, his words sharp and clear. But he needs you. The statement hung between them, simple and impossible. Her exile was meant to be a sentence of safety, isolation. Taking in a Skari child, an infant, broke every rule. It invited danger. It invited death. The settlement's warnings echoed in her memory. Trust no one, especially not them. Above, the meteor shower intensified. A streak of fire tore the sky. Thunder followed, shaking the ground. Daniel didn't flinch. His gaze held hers. Research shows humans make survival choices fast, under 3 seconds when threat is immediate. Hesitation gets you killed. Sarah's hand tightened on the door frame. Her heart hammered. Exile meant safety, but it also meant silence. Emptiness. Then she saw it. The child's tiny fist curled tight around the wet fabric of Daniel's jacket. A human gesture, helpless, needing. Her decision came not from thought, but from something deeper. She stepped back. The door swung inward. Daniel moved quickly, shielding the child from the rain as he crossed the threshold. Safety was gone now, exchanged. The door closed behind them. The bolt slid home. Outside, the storm continued to rage. Inside, 3 lives were now bound. A stranger, an exile, and a child who should not exist. Their fates sealed by a single act of mercy. Daniel stayed near the fire, warming his hands while the storm beat the shelter walls. Sarah gave him dry clothes. The child stayed quiet, wrapped in a blanket. His silver eyes watched them. Daniel spoke without looking up. I found him 3 days west, near the Black River border. His voice was low, steady. He'd been scavenging, old tech sometimes salvage, Not children, he described the scene. A scary camp, or what remained of it, tents torn, supplies scattered, bodies not just scary, humans too. Both sides lay in the mud. That was the first wrong thing. Scary and humans don't die together. They kill each other. But here they were. Dead beside each other, he walked closer. The ground was churned up. Blood there was plenty, but the wounds weren't from blasters or claws. They were precise, methodical, signs of restraint on the adults. Rope marks on wrists. This wasn't a fight. It was a slaughter. Something had taken them all. Something that didn't care about species. Then he heard it. A soft sound. Not an animal. Too rhythmic. He followed it. A collapsed shelter half burned. The sound came from under a fallen hide. He lifted it. There the child lay, on a mat, unharmed, clean. Like the violence never touched him. His eyes were open. He wasn't crying, just breathing, watching. Forensic studies of old war zones show a pattern. Children hide. They get quiet. They become small. Sometimes that's enough. Luck. Chance. A space too tight for a killer to notice. This child had that. He was hidden, preserved. Daniel knelt. The child looked up. No fear, no surprise. His silver eyes held Daniel's. Calm. Too calm for a baby. Daniel knew the rules. Leave Scary alone. Report sightings. Never engage. But the camp was dead. Everything was dead. If he left, the child would die too. Exposure, animals. Whatever did this might come back. He made a choice. Fast. No second thoughts. He wrapped the child in his cloak. Lifted him. The boy didn't struggle. Didn't make a sound. Just kept watching. Daniel carried him out of that place. Walked for 2 days straight. Didn't stop. Now here they were. In an exile shack. With a child who shouldn't be alive. A child from a massacre that made no sense. Humans and Scary dead together. Something else did that. Something that didn't care about their war. The first seed of a darker truth took root in the room. The enemy wasn't who they thought. Sarah cleaned the cut on Daniel's arm. The storm still shook the walls. The child sat on a blanket near the fire. He didn't sleep. He just watched. His silver eyes tracked Sarah's hands as she worked. They followed the cloth, the water bowl, the bandages. His focus was absolute, too steady for an infant. Human babies that age have jerky eye movements. Their attention drifts. His did not. Then his small hands moved. He reached for a loose thread on the blanket. His fingers closed around it. Not a clumsy grab. A precise pinch between thumb and forefinger. He pulled. The thread came free. He held it, studying it. Then he dropped it and reached for a small wooden block Sarah used for kindling. He turned it in his hands. Not playing, examining. Sarah brought him water in a shallow cup. She expected spillage, a mess. Instead, his hands came up. He took the cup. His grip was firm. He drank, no trembling. No water lost. His throat moved in steady swallows. He handed the cup back when he was done. Clean, controlled. A 6-month human child cannot do that. They drool. They knock things over. Their hands are still learning. Daniel watched this. He said, by human markers, he's about 6 months. He'd guessed based on size, muscle tone, the way the child held his head up. Human development has milestones. Sitting up, reaching, grasping. This child was months ahead, maybe more. Neuroscience notes a pattern. When a child develops early, it shows in motor control first. Hands, eyes, coordination. The brain is wiring itself faster. This was that. But it was more. It was deliberate, purposeful. Outside, thunder cracked loud enough to rattle the windows. Sarah flinched. Daniel's head turned toward the sound. The child did not startle. His breathing stayed even. His eyes stayed on Sarah. Human infants jump at loud noises. It's a reflex, a survival instinct. This child had no fear response. Or his was different. Calmer. They looked at each other then, Sarah and Daniel. The same thought passed between them. This was no ordinary child. Not even an ordinary Scary child if such a thing existed. The stories said Scary were vicious, primitive. This child was neither. He was calm, intelligent, observant. The foundation of fear built over years of warnings and propaganda began to fracture. Not from argument, but from evidence. From a child drinking water without spilling. From a gaze that understood too much. The walls they thought were solid now had a crack. And on the other side was not a monster, but a mystery. Sarah needed to call him something. The child felt distant. The scurry felt worse. It marked him as the enemy, a thing, not a person. She looked at him sitting there, calm on the blanket. His silver eyes watched the fire. He needed a name. A real one, she said it quietly. Kylie. It was from the old tongue, a word her grandmother used. It meant strong. Daniel looked up from sharpening a knife. He considered it. His eyes went to the boy. Kale, he said, softer, easier on human tongues. The change was small, but it meant something. It was a choice, to make him more like them, or to leave him as other. Naming is never just sound. Across cultures, it's a ritual. It brings someone inside. It says you belong. To give this child a name was to defy every warning they'd ever heard. It was an act of quiet rebellion. They could have kept calling him the boy, held him at a distance. A problem to be solved, not a person to be known. She tested it. Kale. The child's head turned. Not a slow drift. A direct, swift movement. His silver eyes locked onto hers. He recognized the sound, knew it was for him. Human infants of his age might coo or babble at a familiar voice. They don't often turn to a name on first hearing. That takes months of repetition, connection. This was instant. His recognition was clean, absolute. It suggested an understanding that went beyond hearing, beyond typical development. He wasn't just responding to noise. He was responding to meaning, to a label meant for him alone.